Any of you have any special trophies at home? I actually have a little box I discovered that is a holdover from when I was a kid. And I brought one just to show and tell. One of my trophies, when I played Pee Wee football, it got to the point where I wasn't keeping up and growing and I had to stop because I was getting crushed. But this is a trophy from Pee Wee football. And it's funny because I remember back, as a kid getting the trophy and what a big deal it was. I mean, it's a really big deal. And then as you grow older, you realize, not such a big deal, really. Why do I still have this? I don't know. But it's kind of interesting for us to think about the trophies that mean something in our lives. And what are the most important trophies for you? And I put that in quotes. I want to suggest something to you, that the life you and I leave behind is your most important trophy. Can I just go ahead and get an early amen to that? My wife was actually illustrating this in a particular way, and this sounds kind of odd, but a couple weeks ago, she wrote her obituary. No, she isn't terminally ill, nothing like that. It was not a foreboding. She was accepted into the Daughters of the American Revolution, right? Revolution? I said it wrong earlier. And as part of that, she began to learn that knowing your genealogy is not a given unless it's recorded well. And so she wanted to be sure that certain things are recorded. One of which was this very interesting discovery that she made and we made. And some of you already heard this story a little bit. Her 11th great-grandfather is a guy named Reverend John Robinson. Now, Reverend John Robinson was the first pastor who led the people out of England to establish the first free congregational church in Holland. Little quick history lesson, the Church of England and the king and queen were oppressing the people, and they were dictating what they could do, what they could believe, and if it was against the law to do otherwise or to believe otherwise, by penalty of jail or even death if it persisted. And so a group of Christians were like, you know what? There is no authority that should be dictating our faith and its practice that is higher than God's Word. And yet they're putting themselves above God's Word. And so this band of Christians decided that they needed to be free and autonomous to be able to determine what they believe and how they expressed it without the oppression of a government or a system of religion. And so they left England, the first pilgrims, and they didn't come to America. The first thing they did was go to Holland. And they established the Free Church, the first congregational church in Holland. And Lisa's 11th great-grandfather was the pastor of that church. How cool is that? You go ahead and just say wow again. Now, let me tell you what's so cool about it. I'm going to help you appreciate why it's so cool. It's not just so cool because of him and what he did in his lifetime. What's so cool about it, the reason it's a wow, is because you and I are here today, and in fact America is here today, very much as an extension of him. The life he lived was a trophy, not because it was his life, but because of what he did for your life and for mine. And the reason it's a trophy to celebrate, and not just something that sits on a shelf to admire, is because you and I are here now. And we have free access to God's Word. And no one can tell us what to do or to think that is a higher authority than God's Word. It's a direct extension. The life you leave behind is your most important trophy, especially as it impacts others. The most meaningful life is not what you make of yourself. The most meaningful life is the life that transforms the future of others. And we can look at him very clearly and see how he did that. It's a direct correlation to you and I sitting here right now. You can look at other figures in history, the big names, Martin Luther King Jr. and Gandhi and Dietrich Bonhoeffer and Mother Teresa and people like that. Listen, one of the tenets of Congregationalism that Reverend Robinson and all the reformers that came before him sort of upheld, that endures today in this church, in the Congregational church, is the freedom of conscience. It's a part of the American fabric, too, as a matter of fact. It's a direct extension. That, your conscience is free to choose faith or not, to follow God's Word or not, to determine what's faithful and not. Not because someone else tells you, but because you have the freedom to determine that yourself. What a gift, right? It's an amazing gift. And I want to suggest to you that we lose the perspective of how important this is because we lose historical perspective. For 1,200 years, guys, 1,200 years, the church didn't allow you to have that freedom of choice, that freedom of conscience. From the year 400 roughly to 1600, the church told you what to do and what to believe, what not to do and what not to believe. In fact, they didn't even put the Bible in the common language, so you weren't able to even read the Bible and determine for yourself. They sold what were called tickets, like indulgences. They were called indulgences to the table for communion, and they made them a high price so that only the rich could afford them. So it was barring people from communion who couldn't afford it. There are all kinds of abuses that we just take it so for granted. Our ability to come and go to church and to believe and have access to God's Word. And it's not just a religious thing. Throughout history, listen, for most of history, your destiny was determined for you. If, for instance, you were a woman born in the ancient times, guess what? You were property. You didn't have rights if you were a woman. Your husband could actually kill you for no good reason and not be punished for it. If you were a person of color born in South Africa for many, many, many decades, guess what? You had limited rights. If you were a certain family member born in India, you were in what was called a caste system, and you were oppressed. If you had a certain name, a certain surname, throughout much of history, your destiny was determined for you. Your occupational set was determined for you. Here's a little quiz for you. If your last name, for instance, was Shoemaker, guess what you did for a living? You were a cobbler. You made shoes. Why? Because your daddy and your granddaddy and your great-granddaddy and all the daddies before them were shoemakers. It was determined for you. If your last name was Smith, guess what you did? You were a blacksmith. You worked with metal. It's a done deal. No other options. If your name was Fowler, here's a real interesting one. You know what you did? You were a bird catcher. Fowler. Get it? If your name was Glover, your last name was Glover, you made or sold gloves. Isn't it a good thing that Danny Glover, who was an amazing actor, was not boxed into making gloves or selling gloves? He had the freedom to choose a different life. If your last name was Kellogg, I'm sorry, you didn't eat cereal or even make cereal. You were a killer of hogs. There's a hog there, okay? A killer of hogs. And so the next slide is the joke. You think about that when you're eating your Special K. If your last name was Wheeler, you made wagon wheels. If your last name was Miller, you are a miller of grain. And then finally, and you can guess this one, if your last name was Taylor, you were a tailor. You made clothes. So much of life was determined for, and we lose that because we take our freedom so for granted. But we've got to appreciate where we've come from. And the trophy of this life that we create is in our hands to create it, to make it. The gospel of Jesus frees you to choose your destiny, to choose your passions. They were all chosen for you before. The word passion is sort of our theme for today. And passion, we always associate passion with the heart, right? And we're talking about the heart as the central concern that God has for you and me, above everything else. Listen, the heart shaped by the gospel of Jesus desires what God desires. It intensely desires what matters most. Freedom is always associated with the heart, isn't it? Because you can't make someone love. You can't make someone passionate. You have to freely love, freely choose your passions. And that's what God is wanting to do with our hearts, to shape our passions. Last week we talked about love. The week before that we talked about trust. And then before that, forgiveness. All matters of the heart. God is so concerned about our hearts. Our central text for this whole series is a short but powerful verse in Proverbs. I'm going to say this verse with you. It'll come up in just a second. And then I'm going to ask you to say it with me. as a way for us to internalize it and imprint it on our hearts. Proverbs 4:23. Above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. Say it with me. Above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. Above all else means there is nothing above it. It is the most important thing you can do in your life. It's second to none. Guarding your heart, the condition, the state of your heart is so important. Most things flow from it. No. Some things flow from it. No. Everything flows from it. How can it be more emphatic? This short little verse is so powerful. I want to urge that we internalize it and memorize it and make it something that's so very important on the tip of our tongue, our minds, and in our hearts. Jesus echoed this in Luke chapter 6. He said something that's really an extension of it. He said this, each tree is recognized by its own fruit. People do not pick figs from thorn bushes or grapes from briars. A good man brings good things out of the good stored in his heart. An evil man brings evil things out of the evil stored in his heart. For the mouth speaks what the heart is full of. Again, emphasizing from the Old Testament to the New Testament the status of your heart. Both these texts, interestingly enough, have to do with the heart. Both these texts, they underscore how the outward stuff that we see and that we do always flows from the inward stuff, always flows from the heart. That's why this series is called Pulse Check. How strong is your heart? How strong is your heart? And we're looking at these heart issues. And often, I don't know if you're like me, I think you are. I can learn things, in a book kind of knowledge way. I can learn theory, and all that's really good. But I learn the best when I see it in others, when it's modeled for me. The best thing, the things that have imprinted the deepest in me are things that have been shown to me by someone, been done to me by someone. You follow me? It also, there's a flip side to that too. It can be bad as well. There's a great illustration of this in one of my favorite books. It's called Blue Like Jazz. Donald Miller wrote Blue Like Jazz. In the introduction of the book, he has this very provocative thing. He says, I never liked jazz music until one day I watched a guy standing on a street corner playing a saxophone for 15 minutes with his eyes closed. And then I fell in love with jazz music. And he put it this way. He said, sometimes you have to watch somebody love something before you can love it yourself. It's as if they're showing you the way. Can you connect with that? Think about the people that show you and me the way. Miller, in his book, he's describing a scenario like that of how we can grow our passions, align our passions with God's passions. Someone who did this in the Bible, probably above anyone else, was St. Paul. Paul was one of the most passionate, zealous guys that there ever was. And he is playing jazz with his eyes closed as he writes his epistles. And there's this one little text that I want to point out to you that's an illustration of this. And this is in 1 Corinthians chapter 9. He says this, for when I preach the gospel, I cannot boast, since I am compelled to preach. Woe to me if I do not preach the gospel. Now, what's interesting about this, and I have underlined there the word compelled. There's a Greek word that's used that's translated compelled there. It's called ananke. Now, ananke can also mean inescapable necessity. And I happen to like that phrase better than compelled because it expresses some sense of urgency, doesn't it? It's an inescapable necessity. It is something that's so urgent. There's so much passion behind this. It's an inescapable necessity. And I was trying to think of a way to illustrate this with you guys. And at the expense of sounding really crude, I was thinking about this illustration. You're driving down the road. You're on the highway. Someone else is at the steering wheel. And you see that blue sign on the side of the road that says rest area? And your bladder's screaming at you. And you say, pull off. It's an inescapable necessity. It's urgent. There's passion. Do not pass this exit. That gets at the spirit, the passion underneath what Paul is saying by compelled. He is compelled. He cannot pass this opportunity. It's urgent. It's an inescapable necessity. Why? Because he has the opportunity, the first time in all of history, to share the hope and the good news, the love and the grace of Jesus Christ with the Gentiles, and no one's ever done it before. Oh my gosh, don't pass that exit. It's an inescapable necessity. Do you feel the passion there? And he says, woe to me. Woe to me if I pass this up. Woe to me if I don't help transform their future. If I don't make my life more than a trophy that's just about me. If I don't make my life something that impacts their future, their life. Woe to me if I don't show them the option they have of Jesus Christ. And what's he doing? He's redefining freedom. We often think, especially as Americans, we know what freedom is. Freedom is, I do what I want, when I want, where I want, how I want. No, that's not freedom. That's not freedom. I love Michael Green's definition. Here it is. Freedom is not license to do what I want, but liberation to do what I ought. That's noteworthy, isn't it? It's this idea that you have the freedom of mind and conscience, and you're free when you have options to do what you shouldn't do. And you choose to do what you ought to do. That's freedom. And Paul's redefining that for them and for us. Paul's redefining passion. He's redefining it. Now, not all of us are called to preach. You know, this is one of my callings, but most people are not called to preach. But you know what we're all called to do? Every Christ follower, all Christ followers are called to desire what God desires and to share that with others. That's your calling. Now that can take 1,000 different forms in 1,000 different ways, and you don't have to do it in any one way like anyone else, but in a way that's unique to you. But we're all called to desire what God desires and to share that with others. We're called to let the freedom and the grace of Jesus Christ be known to others. We're called to have passion for transforming the future of others, not just creating a trophy life that sits on a shelf. We're all called to show someone how to love God, to play a little jazz music and let them watch us so they know how to love God too. And Paul played. In fact, I want to share with you a few more verses in the 9th chapter of 1 Corinthians. And he is playing for 3 different sets of people: the Jews, the Gentiles, and the Christians. In other words, everyone who was around him. And watch what he does with his freedom. Watch what he does, not with a license to do what he wants, with a liberation to do what he ought. In 1 Corinthians chapter 9, beginning with verse 19, he says it this way: though I am free and belong to no one, he's declaring his freedom there, I have, you could even insert the word freely, made myself a slave to everyone. Why? To win as many as possible. There's a goal. There's a motivation. To the Jews, I became like a Jew to win the Jews. To those under the law, I became like one under the law, though I myself am not under the law, so as to win those under the law. To those not having the law, that's Gentiles, I became like one not having the law, though I am not free from God's law, but I'm under Christ's law. Why? So as to win those not having the law. To the weak, those were the Christians, I became weak to win the weak. I have become all things to all people, so that by all possible means I might save some. I do all this for the sake of the gospel, that I may share in its blessings. Isn't it amazing what Paul is doing here? He's showing passion for other people. He's using his freedom to accommodate other people. It's the art of accommodating oneself to others. Freely chosen for a reason, because of the freedom of the gospel, and it's to liberate other people's lives, to give them the option of Jesus Christ, his hope, his grace, his love. Passion uses all possible means. That's what Paul's doing here. Does it for the sake of the gospel. Passion is not feeling and doing what you want to feel and do with gusto. Passion is using all possible means to feel what God feels, to desire what God desires, and to share that with others with gusto. That's what passion is. Passion has an end in mind that is radically inclusive of all people, concerned about shaping the future of other people, and anchored in the gospel of Jesus Christ, his hope, his freedom. That, my friends, is passion. Donald Miller goes on to share an example of this. He's playing a little jazz music himself. He's on a college campus, and that's Donald Miller, the author. And he describes how he's concerned about classmates and people on his college campus who had a very bad taste about Christianity in their mouth. Anybody know anybody with a bad taste of Christianity in their mouth? I mean, you don't have to look very far, do you? And so he had this kind of novel idea. He got a group of people together who were Christians, and they decided on this day there was going to be a big festival on the college campus that they would build and place right in the middle of the campus a confessional booth. Now, not your typical confessional booth. This was a reverse confessional. They would come into the booth, and Donald would sit in there, or one of the others, and confess to them all the wrongs of Christians throughout the years. They would confess how it is that Christians had been joyless and loveless and mean-spirited, judgmental and hypocritical. They would confess on behalf of the Crusades. They would confess on behalf of the televangelists. They would confess that Christianity, they had let Christianity be co-opted for political purposes. They would confess that they have misrepresented Jesus in their lives and ask for forgiveness. What was he doing there? He had passion for others and the impact that it would make on their lives, the future. Passion is intensely desiring what matters most. That's what passion is. It's intensely desiring what matters most. And Miller had passion for his college friends and classmates. Listen, the Christians in the 3rd and 4th century had that kind of passion, even more. It was intense. They were passionate about our future, preserving the hope of our future so that we might sit here today. Their desire for us to know Jesus was so intense that death itself was not too high a price. There were many emperors, about 7 or 8, throughout roughly 3 centuries that persecuted Christians, who went to the death for their faith, not because they had to. No one made them, but they chose to because of their passion for the gospel, impacting the next generation, leading to you and to me. Emperors like Nero and Domitian and Trajan and Marcus Aurelius and Diocletian. Listen, under Nero, he took Christians and he lit them on fire like lampposts to light up his garden at night. Nero, we understand by tradition, beheaded the Apostle Paul. Domitian, he liked to see Christians die by the sword, and so they were put into the arena in gladiator fights. Trajan sentenced to death Christians who would not recant their faith. It was Marcus Aurelius who has said about him that Christian blood flowed more freely than ever before. And he actually, go back to the other one, the one just before that. He actually fed Christians to the beasts, and we have all these kinds of ancient murals that depict Christians being fed to wild beasts in the arena. It was Diocletian who destroyed Bibles and churches, took property from Christians, banished them to the mines, or sentenced them to death. And we understand the Apostle Peter was crucified under Nero. And he was crucified upside down. That's the next slide. So that he wouldn't find himself even worthy to be crucified in the way that Jesus was. Early Christian martyrs had a passion for what mattered most. They didn't have to go through that. They had their passions rightly aligned with God's passions, with God's heart. They didn't have to. They got to. They got to. And it's so important that we begin to get really clear about our have-to list and our get-to list. You ever thought about it that way? Listen, you strengthen your heart when you discern and prioritize what you have to do and what you get to do. There are a lot of things that you have to do. Your have-to-do list is what's out of your control for the most part. If you work in an office setting, for instance, we know statistically that you have in a given week about 36 hours of paperwork on your desk, and you'll spend about 3 hours in that week pilfering through it. We know that you'll spend about 52 minutes per day on the phone and 15 minutes per day on hold. Those are things that are just largely out of your control. We all have a have-to list, right? We know that the average American spends 7 minutes per day feeding pets or watering plants. So if you have a pet or you have a plant, those are things you just have to do, right? We know that you'll spend 16 minutes per day looking for lost objects. Some of you spend a lot more time than 16 minutes a day. You'll spend 75 minutes per day commuting. You'll spend 6 months over your lifetime in traffic. Now, in the on season in South Florida, I think it's longer than that. You'll spend 4 minutes per day filling out paperwork for the government. What a nightmare does that sound? What does all this represent? This is the have-to list, and often we let the have-to list dictate our lives, become the trophy of our lives, instead of choosing it. That's why you've heard the saying before, if the devil cannot make you bad, he'll make you busy. Your have-to list is the devil's tool to keep you from focusing on the get-to list. That's where your freedom comes in. That's where you get to choose the life that is a trophy that impacts others. That is truly life. Paul said, though I am free and belong to no man, I make myself a slave to everyone. Not because he had to, because he got to. Passion, a strong heart, has to do with what you get to do. That's where our focus is. That's where our priorities are. You don't control your have-to-do list. You get to control your get-to-do list. Your get-to opportunities are opportunities to bless others and to bless God. Listen, in Jesus' day, there was a rabbinic tradition where if you were a really pious Jew, you would bless God, get this, 100 times a day using this short little rabbinic blessing. And here it is. Blessed art thou, O sovereign of the universe, that you have delivered me from darkness and opened my eyes. Now think about that. You wouldn't say that 100 times, in a row and get it over with. You would do that throughout your day so that your goal was 100 times. You know what that means? That means you had to be conscious and intentional about doing that all throughout your day. Not because you had to, because you got to, you wanted to. Your get-to list is a bless list. You bless others with it. It's your passion list. It's what you do to build up others, to shape others. I'm always watching this happen in people's lives, and it happens a lot around the church. And it's not just a church thing or even just a religious thing. But let me give you some examples. Some of the get-to lists I witnessed recently. Every Monday morning, we have a dedicated group of people that show up here and they count the money. Now, counting money, it may sound like, it's not sexy at all. It is drudgery because they get to the end of it and they go, oh, we didn't balance. And they have to go back to the drawing board. Oh, we didn't balance. And they'll be here for hours sometimes. But you know what? It's not drudgery for them because they realize that by doing that, they are empowering our congregation to pay the bills, keep the lights on, and to do ministry that shapes the lives of others. It's not a have to, it's a get to. Thursday, I was over in the youth building and I saw all of these adults who have busy lives sitting down one-on-one in our Homework Angels program, tutoring Hispanic kids one-on-one, pouring their lives into it. And I knew each one of these adults, and I know what's going on in their lives. And I'm thinking, oh man, that's a trophy. They're shaping the young lives and the families that will come out of those young lives because they're pouring themselves into them. They get to do that. There is, at this very time, every single Sunday, something that you probably don't even know about that's going on in the life of our church. It's a service that we put on, yes, another service, off campus at the Allegro Senior Living Center. We have a dedicated group of folks that go over there and they put on about a 30 to 40 minute worship service for people that cannot leave. About 25 to 30 people gather, and every week they share the gospel. Not because they have to, but because they get to. We have a band and a tech crew that is up here serving you every single week because they know that by leading you in worship, they're leading you closer to the grace and the love of Jesus Christ. Not because they have to, they're not compelled, they get to. They get that. I had a group of ladies approach me earlier this week, and they were even hesitant to do so. And they said, we got some concerns and some ideas about some things in our children's ministry, our Epic Kids ministry, that we think if we explore these and we take it a step further, it's going to make it so much richer, better, and even safety protocol better. And so they said, we didn't know if we should come to you, but we care so much. They had so much passion for it. They shared it. And so we had this action plan that went out from there. And it's awesome that they chose to do so. It was a get-to moment because they're passionate about shaping the next generation. It's not just a religious thing, though. Listen, my kids and I were at the Brevard Zoo last week. And there's this cool section in the Brevard Zoo where there's some artwork that's been done by a 60-year-old artist who lives on the coast of Oregon. And she's collected shore trash, washed ashore. And she has made amazing artwork at it. It's called Washed Ashore, Art to Save the Sea. And there's so much of it. She made these giant figures. And I have a couple of pictures with my kids standing in front of them. One is a big bird. All of that is trash from the ocean. And go to the next one. This is another one with trash from the ocean. That she's done tons of this stuff, and there's so much of it. She's decided that for the rest of her life, she's only going to use seashore trash for her art. Now, what is she doing? She's taking a passion for art, and she's combining it with a passion for saving the environment and educating the next generation. And that's the result right there with my kids. This takes a lot of different forms. There's a lot of freedom in the way we express this. Listen, our Missional Women's Bible Study does something it was a small idea that became an incredible blessing that's going to be your blessing too. And you've actually helped them with this. We've asked people to put together blessing bags, little hygiene kits, and our youth group sort of packs them together. I have one here. You see one on the screen. And it's hygiene kits. You've been at that point at an intersection or a red light when someone is panhandling and you look away, you don't really know what to do. And so their idea was, let's do little blessing bags, hygiene kits, and you can roll the window down and hand one and bless them with it. So that you don't have to look away. You get to look them in the eye and share some human dignity and bless them with something practical and drive away not feeling guilty, right? And so what I've done today is at each of the services, I've had these bags in these red bins after the services. And typically the ladies in the Bible study take them and give them away. And we've had so many, we take them to shelters and places that feed the hungry and the homeless for them to use. But today I decided to take them and offer them so that you'll trip over that red bin on your way out. And as you trip over it, grab one. Now, there may not be enough for everyone. Hope there is. We've been giving them out all morning. But it's right there outside the door for you to grab, throw in your back seat, and when you come to that opportunity and someone is expressing that kind of need, guess what? You get to do. You get to bless them. So grab one and throw it in your back seat. All these, you know what all these things I'm describing are? They're trophies. These are trophies that transform the future of others. And listen, guys, you don't have to be Mahatma Gandhi or Martin Luther King Jr. You don't have to be Mother Teresa. You don't have to be the Reverend John Robinson to make an eternal impact in the lives of others. You don't have to be the Apostle Paul or a martyr who gives your life to show somebody how to love God, to play a little jazz music for them. Listen, if you haven't heard anything else, this is the bottom line. We're going to end with this, and you can write this down. The bottom line of what we're saying today is this. Choose what matters most. Intensely desire what God desires, and your heart will grow strong with passion. Amen.